It's on, I want to put it on YouTube because it feels important to share this story because it's a story of the human spirit. And if I went there and met Robert, it's not just for myself, but it's also not just for me and Robert, but it's also to inspire as many people as we can. So let's just start by a few moments in silence and just landing in our belly. Yeah. And, okay. So I just want to start by explaining a bit some of the language I'm going to use because I'm going to use different types of languages. Because although I'm talking about a story that happened in the material world, I also went there as a spiritual person, as an energy healer, as a shaman, as a Quaker, as a someone who is willing to enter places which are quite raw, but which can open the door to something that becomes sacred. So when I'm going to talk sometime, I will go into perspective of various layers of consciousness, because at the end of the 3 days, indeed, we experience something with Robert, which is at the level of altered levels of consciousness. And I'm really using all those words with absolute humbleness, but as a witness of, yeah, what life is, the bigger picture of life is. So I can only start by thanking people. I've got lots of people to thank, so please bear with me because it feels very important. Well, thank you all for being here to start with. It's the first time I'm going to tell the story because when I came back, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't feel capable of talking about it, and it felt very important for me to stay in a sacred silence, actually. So it's the first time I talk about it. The thank yous are going to start at the starting point because some people here I don't know and they maybe don't know me. I don't think if they've read the book, Friends for Life, That's Letters, which is the book we co-authored with Robert. So the starting point of all these stories is my mom. My mom is here on the call. She's just turned 96. She's fantastic. And when I was 17 years old, 16 years old, something like that, she took me to the cinema to see a documentary of a man who was on death row and who was executed. And that documentary at my age really had a massive impact on me, so much so that I just knew somewhere in my being that one day I would do that. One day I would reach out to someone on death row, just as a friend, just to bring some humanity there, some presence, and here we are today because of that. And interestingly, the other day I asked my mom if she remembered that documentary, and she said no. Because in those days we were very, very involved in alternative cinema and seeing lots of weird things. So she didn't remember. So the most important person this evening is Jan Arians. So Jan, you will have a time to talk once I've told the story. I really want you to share. But Jan is the founder of Lifelines. He's also a Quaker. And I cannot put words of my gratitude for what you have done with your life to dedicate your life or a big portion of your life to bringing some humanity to people on death row. And thank you, because really it's thanks to you that I'm here. I went there, the book exists, and that Robert had a friend when I was there. I also want to thank Jason, my friend Jason, so he will also have a time to talk. My niece, Laetitia, because she's really helping me learn and educate myself around Instagram, using Instagram, as I have an Instagram for promoting the book, my visit to see Robert, and our second book. My daughter, because my daughter always brings me kind of normality, and she's always there supporting me, although she might not understand what I do. I don't think she understands fully what I do, but she's there unconditionally. And she's also very much an IT support for me. On my trip to the States, she was a huge IT support. I really want to thank my husband, Glenn, um, for all your support and always unconditionally supporting me in whatever I do. And I also want to acknowledge that I was able to go to the States thanks to the funding and the donations, the financial donations of 44 people. So it took 44 people who, in a very short space of time, funded me to go to the States. And not only they funded me, but the messages I received of support, of belief. I've had people I don't know thanking me for what I was doing. And I was crying a lot when I went through that funding process. And then I really want to thank, well, all my family, all my friends, because I realize I have so many people in my life who really believe in me, although I have maybe an unusual past, but people believe me, they support me, they love me, and I'm just oozing gratitude. So, yeah, so I started with my mom, who took me to see that documentary, and then Life is Life. And then when I was in my 40s, and when I came to live in the UK, one day I saw an advert in a magazine for Lifelines. And that really triggered this old memory in me of like, whoa, one day I said I would write to someone on death row. And in fact, several times I came across that advert. And every time it did me a nudge, but then very quickly I ignored it because it's quite a big thing to commit to writing to someone on death row. And then when I became 50 years old, I was going to have a massive operation. And I was there not doing much because I was so uncomfortable, so unwell. And I was in a way reviewing my life. And this is when I thought, hang on, I said one day I'm going to write to someone on death row. So it's now. Now I'm going to do it. And I sent an email to Lifelines very quickly, received an email back. And yet again, it took nonetheless another 6 months for me to be able to make that jump of the commitment of writing to someone on death row. And yeah, when I started writing to Robert, I was very clear. Never am I going to see him on death row. Never am I entering death row. He's a pen friend. We shall write to each other. And that's it. And when we started writing, for the people who've read the book, you will see it's pretty clear. Very quickly, something profound was happening between us. So profound and unusual, not what I was expecting, that I just felt I've always wanted to write, to be a writer anyway, but I just felt that's it. We have to do a book. On top of it, this man one day is going to be executed. His life is very short, he's very extreme, he's an incredible person. So I suggested to him we write a book. That was about 9.5 years ago. And he said yes. Of course, he said yes. And yeah, so we embarked on that journey of writing a book. And throughout the years, I've had many challenges and obstacles and resistance, and never fully believing in the value of that book. And very early on, I sent a few pages to my friend Jason, just like an idea of how do you do a book with someone through letter writing, someone I've never spoken to, someone I've never met. And when Jason saw those pages, he said, that's amazing. I'm going to support you. and that has value. And all the way up to COVID arrived, the first lockdown of COVID. And Jason said to me, by then we had quite a substantial amount of material. And for maybe 3-4 months, we met every day, 5 days a week, I think, at 7 o'clock in the morning to review the book. And really, we've looked at every single word, every single punctuation, every single everything. And that for me was the start of a learning curve of to see myself as an author, not just I write and I write spontaneously and I write letters. But something happened. And also Jason was also like a spiritual teacher for me, because he was like, it doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if you want to come and work. 7 o'clock, you're there. It's a commitment. You show up. We do it. And it was brutal. In those days, I was not sleeping very well. It was brutal, but we did it. And then there was a time when I said to Robert, I don't want to publish that book. I feel very exposed. I'm exposing myself. I'm exposing myself with a committed murderer on top of that. I don't want to do the book anymore. And Robert had a brilliant answer in his letter. That's all through letter sharing. And he said, take a break. And then we start again. We do it. For Robert, that book, our friendship, our second book, it's his life, it's his legacy, it's his voice in the world. It makes meaning to his entire life, but it also makes meaning to 3 people who lost their lives because of him. And then came 2 years ago, the book suddenly was in paper form. We had gone from a manuscript in a computer file to a paper shape of a book. And I started to really think, I still don't know if that book has got value. I still felt very doubtful, very anxious. And I thought, if there is one person who can tell me if that book has got value, it's going to be the founder of Lifelines. So Lifelines is the organization I belong to, who links people like me, who wants to write in the UK to someone on death row in the States. So I very, very courageously contacted Jan, and I said, I've co-authored the book with my pen friends. Would you like to read it? And if you like it, well, first of all, tell me what you think of it. And if you like it, would you like to do a forward? And that for me was a very courageous act, because so far I had just kept the book to myself. Few friends had read it, and that's it. And I think within 48 hours, I received a very long email from Jan that reduced me to tears, where he was, well, you said what you said, but it was so powerful and such a validation that, yes, our book had value. So we printed the book with Jason's help, always with Jason's help. And then a year ago, in October, I met Jan for the first time, face to face, because we don't live in the same part of the UK. And I tell you, I was one woman when I entered in that cafe to meet Jan, and then I was another woman when I came out. And by then I had heard twice Robert's voice for 10 minutes after months of trying to be able to speak on the phone with him. Anything to do with the prison is very difficult, very complex, and very poor quality. But I had heard Robert's voice, and I felt it's not just letters on a page of paper, you know, and his voice was incredible. So I said to Jan, I think I'd like to see Robert, you know. Jan, in his spiritual power, in his presence, said to me, of course, you have to go and see Robert. And when are you going? And I did what I normally do if I want something to be safe in my life. I push it in the future. So I said, I don't know, in about 4 years. And Jan had such a look of horror in his face, of like, what is this woman talking about? This man could be executed way before that. And he just said to me, in 1 year, you're gone. And I said, my favorite excuse. I don't have the money, which is true, but it is also an excuse. And he said to me, you crowdfund. And that again was a learning curve. I had never crowdfunded, and I just did it. And as I said, 44 people came very fast to support me and to give me the money for me to be able to go to see Robert. So that was last October. And my first idea was to go on death row in April. And then there came a point where I freaked out and I hit massive fear and I felt I can't do it. I have to postpone it slightly more. I need to be psychologically very, very clear on how I'm going to live that. How am I going to be able to enter death row? How am I going to be able to be in front of Robert? So I decided to go in October, which would be exactly a year after we met with Jan, and also because the climate in Arizona would be less hot. And I felt that's allowing me to be very clear on how I'm going to enter death row. So I was very clear on how I was going to enter death row throughout the months. One was I was going to be me. But the way I was going to be me, I had this big shawl with big, bright butterfly wings. And butterflies are also Robert's symbol of change. But I wanted something very colorful, something that could protect me, that could cocoon me, and something quite playful. I knew I was going to enter as a shaman. What do I mean by that? I mean as someone who is aware that there is a deeper layer of consciousness, a deeper layer of energies and vibrations, and to bring a deeper sacred space when I would be with Robert. And I knew Robert, I had told Robert, and he was obviously very open to that. I knew I would enter as a Quaker, which means I would be there in silence, I would be there in presence, and I would be there acknowledging his divinity, his sacredness as a human being. I was eventually there for 3 days, and for each of the 3 days also I decided to be dressed in very specific ways, which I will go as we go through the journey of being there. So let me have a little sip. So I traveled on the 14th of October last month, and I was meant to travel from London to Phoenix and then Phoenix to Tucson, south of Arizona. And when I'm in Heathrow, within an hour of me being in Heathrow, the planes are cancelled. And then I received a text saying I was in 6 hours going to go via LA and then LA to Tucson, which proved to open a door, which is in a way what that journey has taught me. What that journey has taught me, that week in the States, those 3 days with Robert has taught me so many things, and so many things I can't see yet. I don't know yet. I'm too close to it. But how guided I was. I've been guided. I've been protected. And I met so many angels, so many people who are just generous of spirits. But because my plane was changed to go to LA, a little miracle happened for me anyway. When eventually I arrived in LA, by then it was about 20 hours I'd been traveling, and I was very, very tired, very tired. Eventually, when I'm in the lounge to go to the plane to go to Tucson, I'm sitting next to a man whose energy was very powerful. And then I realized he had a cap on his suitcase, and I could vaguely, that cap was doing something to me. And it was a 4-leaf clover at the front, and on the side it said, "Be lucky." And I realized it was a cap of someone who had just done Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins is one of my mentors in life, one of the people I find particularly interesting in the field of personal development and energy work. And that man had actually just done a week of Tony Robbins work. And I started talking with him. And that logo of that sentence of "be lucky" became a bit of like a momentum whilst I was in the States. It's an attitude, it's a choice, it's a way of thinking, it's a mindset. And talking to that man who was on such a powerful energy and vibration really helped me to finish my journey and finally arrive at my Airbnb, where I was met by another angel, a Mexican lady who was waiting for me. And she looked at me, we looked at each other, and her first words to me were literally, "You're beautiful." And I was like, wow, I've crossed the world to do something very, very difficult, to go on death row to see Robert. And the person who greets me tells me I'm beautiful. And we just saw each other's spirit, you know, and more about her as the story unfolds. And the second day, I had 2 days to land before entering death row. And somehow, whilst I was traveling, I pulled a muscle here in my back. And by the first day I was in Arizona, I started to be in agony. I was having massive spasm. That was the second night, in fact, and I couldn't sleep, I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand, I could do nothing. And thank God there was that time delay. So I could ring my husband who was awake. I could ring Jason. I was literally having an absolute nervous breakdown. I think I had to make sense of my body. I think was telling me something more than I had a trapped muscle. I was having a breakdown of, why am I doing that? Why am I here? I was actually angry at Jan. I was like, my God, I was like, this is all Jan's fault. I'm here. Why did I ever say yes to Jan? and and I think it was this thing of like, when your life knows you're about to do something really powerful, the body, the psyche expresses certain things. So for me, it was like I was in absolute agony and I could do nothing. And so my husband said, well, wait until it's daytime and then go and find painkillers. Jason said the same. It was amazing to be able to have support like that. And eventually, when it was 8 o'clock in the morning, I texted my landlady and I said, I'm in agony. I need you to take me to a chemist or something. And again, this woman proved to be an absolute angel. I also had an issue I had to deal with, which was I was only allowed to enter death row with my passport and a bag of $30 in coins to be able to buy food and drink when I would be with Robert. And I didn't know how to find those coins. The day before, I'd been to the supermarket, I'd been to a chemist, and everywhere I asked, they were just, no, we don't do coins. So when eventually my landlady Mirta is taking me to find a chemist and all of that, I explained to her. She barely spoke English. I speak a bit of Spanish, so we managed like that, and we managed actually very well. And she said we went to a supermarket and everybody is Mexican over there, and I could understand what they were saying. And some people say go to a laundromat. So she took me to a laundromat and there was a machine, and I was eventually able to change some banknotes into coins. But at some point she completely panicked and went, quick, we have to leave, because she realized it was for customers only, and she didn't want to have any problems. But I managed to change $60. So I had $20 for each day. That's important for the rest of the story. Anyway, yeah. Came the 17th, so Friday the 17th, woke up around 3, 4 a.m. and I had the taxi booked for 7 a.m. to take me to death row, which was about a 15 minutes drive in the desert. And I was in a state of, I think now looking back, I was in a kind of chronic state of shock and a chronic state of, I don't know how to put it. Terror might be a very strong word, but terrified at the idea of entering death row. And I knew, I hadn't told anyone, but I knew that morning when I would arrive, there was going to be an execution. So I also didn't know how I was going to handle being with Robert whilst his friends, his mates from the cell opposite his cell, was going to be executed. And so anyway, my taxi arrived. We are driving in the desert. We passed some very poor areas like slums. And we arrived, and I see this huge complex in the desert where you see nothing except massive fences, razor wires, and a kind of entrance. And off I went to the entrance. And this is where things became interesting because I didn't know what was happening and nobody was interacting with me. So there were people in uniforms, in brown uniforms, which are, I guess, people, I guessed, are staff from the prison. There were a few people entering. You had an X-ray machine, X-ray thing like in an airport. And nobody was kind of dealing with me. So I just followed what other people were doing. And eventually I find myself in those first two doors, which are creating that no man's land. You pass, the door closes, you're inside those two doors closed, and then the other one opens, and then you're in the prison complex. And then I could see there was a kind of like opaque window. And I realized, because I couldn't even see windows in that entrance, but afterwards, I learned that the windows are opaque to protect prison staff. So I could see there was someone there and there was a gap so you could talk. So I was saying to the guy, well, or the person I'm coming to visit, and I just received abuse, absolute aggressive abuse my way. And I was like, okay, okay. But anyway, eventually that other door opened and I was in the prison complex. With my bags, I had two bags. I had my bags of coins, I had my mobile phone, and I had been told I would have a locker because I didn't come by car. So I was again saying to the guy, I need a locker, and I was just receiving abuse. So anyway, here I am in that prison complex with my bags, with everything, and then this crazy little white van arrives at full speeds, driven by a man in orange, so an inmate, because that prison complex got lots of different prisons. So I expect that must be a low security prison, that some of the inmates are drivers, with music blasting, and everybody went on the bus. So I went, okay, let's go on the bus. And there was no seat belts. Nobody had the seat belts. The bus was very run down. The door was open and that guy just went, shoo, not even on, it was not even a road. It was tracks in the desert. And I thought, wow, are they not breaking the law there with that guy driving like that? And I had said to the guy, okay, I'm going to Rincon. So I knew that was the unit where Robert is. So eventually it drops me to Rincon. And I see again those very high fences with those massive razor wires, a no man's land, and then another fence, those razor wires, and then a building. And I don't know, my wisdom told me do not get trapped in that no man's land, Susan, no matter what happens, you don't get stuck there. So thank God there was another man who came out with me. So I just followed him. And I said to him, are you visiting? And he said, no, I'm staff. And I went, all right, okay. And I entered that building and I again said, there was a staff, again, brown in brown. And I said, I'm coming to visit Robert Poison, blah, blah, blah. And I received this aggressive abuse. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Okay, so the guy was like, no, no Robert Poison, no, no, no. And eventually I said, but it's Death Row. And he said, oh, well, Death Row is Rincon too. So I'm like, all right, okay. So I go, so you guys just go out. The bus is going to take you again and go to Rincon too. And I was in a state of hyperventilation and very, very stressed at being in such an environment. So I said to the man, please explain to me exactly how do I go out from this building? I pass those fences and I wait for the bus. And again, I just receive abuse. Well, okay, so eventually I went back to the fence and I could see a guy on the other side, and he somehow I managed to pass that no man's land, wait again for the minibus to come back with that blasting music, that guy, me with my bags, thinking, how come I've got my bags? How come I've got my mobile phone? This is really bizarre. Anyway, that guy took me to Rincon, again, a Mexican guy. Hola, bon dias. I love speaking languages. So it was very surreal with that blasting music and all of that. Anyway, I arrive at Rincon, and this time I see that those two fences are locked with massive padlocks. So I thought, okay, at least someone is going to have to come and be with me because they have to undo those padlocks. So I ring and nothing happens, and I rang and nothing happens. Anyway, I'm going to cut it short, but it was a very difficult process, very stressful for me to enter death row. Eventually, this officer came, a young woman, and she took one look at me with my bags and she said, have you got special authorization? And I go, well, no, I've been told I would have a locker. And she looked at me and then she said, where is your security pass? And I go like, I've got nothing. Nobody dealt with me at the entrance. And this woman looked at me kind of like, what's going on? Anyway, eventually she made me enter death row. We entered in the room where I was going to meet Robert. I realized I was going to be there on my own with Robert and her. A big room with big chunky tables, few vending machines, a big red line all around it, metal wires at the windows. And this woman said to me, we have to deal with your bags, put them there. She closed a room. Anyway, eventually I saw Robert arrive. So when I saw Robert arrive, he was exactly as I knew he would be. I knew he would be my height. I knew he would be big. He's a big guy. But I have one photo of him, but he looked much older than I thought he would. And I think it's not that he's old, he's 49, but it is his tiredness of living. He's exhausted of life, and I could feel that. But we locked eyes, and then he was dealing with his own security checks. So again, that was like, it really put a layer of we're not in a normal context. There is no spontaneity. We're not greeting each other. He's dealing with right now with these security checks. And I knew we would be allowed to hug when he arrived, and then we would be allowed to hug when we parted, and that's that. Anyway, he entered, we hugged, a kind of hug where I couldn't feel anything because it's so enormous. And then we looked at each other, and the only thing I could see was his eyes just sparkling like a child, sparkling with joy and life force. And then he took me to the window, and through the fences, the razor wires, the fences by the metal grids by the window, he showed me a building on the left, and he said, this is where I live. And that shocked me because I realized how I've never used that language for Robert. I always use Robert is on death row, but not Robert lives on death row, but Robert lives on death row. He lives. And that was so, I've had so many moments where I realized my layers of prejudice or my layers of not fully grasping or not being able to have a full in-depth connection with him. So that was the first one. I lived there and I could see it. And the first thing I had to ask him and discuss with him was the execution, because I knew there was an execution. So Robert said yes. So it was around 8 in the morning, and he said, yes, my friend's going to be executed at 10. So I said, okay, we'll do something meaningful. We'll be in a sacred space. And he said yes. And instantly it was easy, very easy. So I'm just going to show if you can see it, a drawing I did very quickly of us at our table. That's Robert's pass, and that's this table. And instantly it was easy, and instantly we were writing. We were working on book number 2. We are very clear. We wanted to do poetry. There was no need to talk. There was no need for unnecessary words. And then we went to the vending machine to buy a drink. And this is when I realized that red line on the floor, Robert was not allowed to pass it. So Robert was not allowed to go to the vending machine, and Robert was not allowed to touch the coins. And one of the biggest impression, my first biggest impression of Robert, which is going to sound so obvious, but he's not a free man. That's what struck me so much. I am not with a free man, but it's the first time in my life I am not with someone who is free. And that was, I can't even put words, but his entire being was, this is not a free man. But what I perceived is, because this man is not free, he's a master. He has mastered himself with a capital S. He's a master. Let me give you a few facts before we carry on as well. So Robert's been on death row for nearly 30 years. Out of the 30 years, he has spent 21 years in solitary confinements. The last time he touched someone out from the outside world was at the end of his court case, when his mom came to grab him when he was sentenced to death. That's the last time he touched someone from outside. That was the first time he had a contact visit. And the last time he saw a friend from the outside world was in 2009. So that puts things a bit in perspective. It's like concept we can't grasp. Very quickly, the officer, that young woman who was an angel, there were 2 angels on death row. The 2 officers there were absolute angels, people who are absolutely professional. You really felt you don't mess around with that woman or that man. There was a woman and a man, but they were humans, and they could see that death row inmates are humans. They are people, and they had such respect for everybody and decency for everybody. I've never experienced any abuse from them. So very quickly, this woman came back to me and she said, you have to go back out of the entire prison complex, because you shouldn't have your bags. Nobody checked you in, which is a huge mistake. And they're going to give you a locker, which is in fact outside the prison, and then you come back. And she said, don't worry, it shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. So off I went out of death row. She had to open the first gate, close the first gate, go together in the no man's land. She opens the second gate, I go out, etc. And she said to me, just wait for the minibus. I've told them the minibus is going to come and fetch you, and then you'll go back out, go back in. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited so long that eventually I rang back. And she appeared at the building, and I said, nobody's coming. And I was feeling so hyper stressed, because I was like, I don't know how to deal with this situation. This is like, I'm in the middle of the desert. I was in the middle of the desert with all those fences and razor wires, and seeing the minibus drive over there, but nobody was coming to pick me up. Now I understand. After the 3 days there, I finally understood what was going on. Death row is the lowest of the lowest in the hierarchy of prison. So they boycott people who enter death row. They boycott people who come out of death row. So the minivan doesn't come to pick you up. They let you wait. This is why I suspect they didn't deal with me at the entrance, because I was the only visitor on a Friday, because it's not a visiting day, because I came from Europe, I was allowed to come on a Friday. Because I'm like, in fact, that event resulted in me violating state law. On the Sunday, I saw it big written. I violated state law because of their not dealing with me. But anyway, let's drop that. But I had to go back out, go back in, which took probably an hour, in fact. And by the time I come back in, it was kind of the time for the execution. And thank God the execution wasn't in the prison itself, because the Robert's friend had been taken to another death row, which is closer to Phoenix, so a few hours from there. But the time was coming. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, and we knew we were holding a sacred space for his friends. And I couldn't imagine what Robert was thinking that there are big chances one day he's going to be executed. And what we spontaneously did, we wrote poetry. We wrote something just we couldn't touch each other. There was lots of sort of shyness. We can imagine if you haven't touched someone or been with a friend for 30 odd years, or you haven't, the last time you saw someone through a glass was 29. So Robert was also very shy, very in his own space. And then Robert started telling me stories of his friends, and there was humor there. We laughed. And eventually Robert read me his poem, which is going to be in the second book. And there was lots of humor. And Robert's words were just, he would like that. And there was a simplicity as well throughout those 3 days of being with Robert, the simplicity of what really matters in life. And from there, I offered to Robert that we open the shamanic space, and he said yes. And he closed his eyes. And I've worked with lots and lots of clients doing energy work, intuitive work, but I've never experienced someone closing their eyes and going so deeply and so fast within. Because it's 29 years that Robert's only way not to be on death row is through meditation and through visualization. And I can imagine when he was in solitary confinement, that must have been a very important tool as well, to be able to go within and imagine and go into an inner spiritual space. So that really surprised me, how very powerfully something happened that I've never witnessed in anyone else. And we have a shaman also on this call here this evening, Cinzia, which I'm very grateful for you to be here. So I did the process, which is acknowledging like Mother Earth, Father Sky, the directions, the 4 directions, the heart, the ancestors, the land. I felt we were in sacred lands of the Amerindians, of First Nation people. And when we were finished, Robert opened his eyes, and he was shaking, actually. He was shaking, and he said, this is, I've never experienced that in my life. And although Robert is a very spiritual person, all his spirituality comes completely from his own journey within his experiment, his visualization, his escaping this reality. And we just embarked on 3 days of spending 8 hours sitting at a table together. So imagine spending 8 hours sitting next to someone, even if it's your wife or your husband or someone you love very dearly or your best friends. It's very intense. And off we went. And very quickly also, I realized there was not much food I was going to be able to eat in the vending machine, because I'm gluten-free and nothing was gluten-free. So I literally only had a few Cokes, a few crisps, a few ice creams during those total of 24 hours. And we had lots of very playful moments, and we had moments where we could go out in the tiny yards. So at 11 o'clock so during the execution, at one point, Robert said to me, we are under lockdown. Death row is under lockdown right now. which brought a different notion to the word lockdown. You know, when we were under COVID, we were under lockdown, but being on death row during an execution, being under lockdown, that was a different meaning of the words. So he explained when there is an execution, all the inmates are in their cells, nobody was in the yards, and he was, if I wasn't with you right now, I would be in a cell. We're not, nobody moves, which is a form of cruelty as well, because people can't interact or do something together if they wanted. Anyway, we held it, but eventually we were able to go out to the yards. And again, there was those huge fences, those razor wires. We were not allowed to go close to the fence. We were filmed and recorded all the time I was in that room. And when we were in the yard, the guard was with us. So we were about 3 meters from the fence. On the other side, there was an inmate. And this inmate is Robert's best friend. And for those who have read the book, there is a passage in the book when Robert eventually came out of solitary confinement, where he met his friends for the first time in a very long time, and they didn't know how to shake hands. And that is just such a powerful passage in the book. But that was him. And I know this man is a sexual offender and a murderer, although I don't know the details of what he has done, but I know that. And this man greeted me as if I was a queen. I'm not exaggerating. He greeted me with the highest respect because there I was on death row. There I was across the world to come and see his friends. And instantly it was funny. And instantly we were joking. And instantly I was like, wow, this is so not what I was expecting. And there was life force and there was like joy, and it was profound at the same time. He's a poet and he's also published a poetry book, and he's also spent decades, nearly decades, on solitary confinements. Anyway, we had to go back in, and then Robert said to me, my friends, I'm realizing time is running, I'm never going to be able to share everything, but his friends, another friend, he has 4 friends on death row, people he really calls friends, which means are people he trusts, was going to come to be with, to see his lawyer. So he was just going to come to go to the vending machine, and then he would go in one of those little rooms where they cannot be filmed or recorded. And this tall man arrived in orange, came straight to me to shake my hand. I didn't know if we were allowed to shake hands, but he came to shake my hand. And again, the life force from this man, the presence of this man just took my breath away. And he thanked me for the book. He thanked me for our book with Robert. He said, thank you for having written that book. Me as a death row inmate, it has helped me. It has helped me understand myself, understand my life. Thank you. And that was such a powerful thank you, because I've had lots of people commenting about the book, but there was a man in orange in death row thanking me for it. And that was just so powerful. I'm going to jump a bit because I'm realizing time is flying really fast, but I'm going to jump to the second day. The second day was very different. There were 8 people. Again, the process of entering death row at that time was very different. By then, I understood a bit more what was happening. There were lots of visitors. The entire process took an hour and a half. In that hour and a half, I again met angels. And I want to mention one woman, Christy, who looks such a cool lady, all tattooed, feathers, earring. And this woman is an attorney. She enters death row, she enters prison, and she works against the death penalty. And that woman was an angel to me. She was just so positive. And I was like, again, my breath was taken away by her, looking so like a cool dude woman. But what a powerful person. What dedication. What, yeah, absolutely incredible. Anyway, when I entered that room with lots of people, the energy that day was much easier. And again, I want to use the word sacred. I've worked in hospice. I've worked for 2 years in a hospice, and I've worked with people who are dying. I've been with people when they're just dead, and I've worked with dead bodies. And when you do that kind of work, you know you're in a space that's sacred. You're in a space where you perceive light, where certain things happen because the veil of consciousness is very thin when you are dealing with moments like that. But on that second day, the veil became very thin again, the second and the third day. And I was with those men. 3 of them were with their wives. And I have to say now I understand how you could marry someone on death row. I do understand. I didn't understand before, but now I'm like, I understand. There were one man with his parents, one with his sister and niece. Everybody shook hands. We were not really allowed, but those 2 guards, those 2 angels allowed for humanity, so people could shake hands, people could talk a bit. And again, the sense of humor was just there, like such a brutal also sense of humor. I met an inmate who's been there 34 years. He's Amerindian. He spoke to me in his language, which was absolutely amazing. He has done all his appeals. He's a friend of Robert. He could be next to be executed. And this man was like exuding presence, brutal sense of humor, depth, lightness of being. It was like, I can't really put words. But on that second day, on that second afternoon, there came a point where at one point I passed the veil, and suddenly I was looking around me and I was seeing those men and those people and me and Robert. And the only thing I can describe is I saw light. I saw the light of love. I saw the light of consciousness. I saw the light of humanity. I saw the light of spirit shine. And I started crying. And Robert, who was hypersensitive to me and hyper protective, he was really protecting me, very aware of me in that environment. He was like, whoa, what's going on? And I was like, can you see? But can you see? And I realized that I was also a part of it. I was not just witnessing it. I was actively a part of that room, of what happened in that room. And what Robert said to me was, Jan, you're going to understand. He said, what you are seeing is only possible thanks to people like you who believe in us, who love us, see us like people and come and see us. And yeah, that was, at that moment, I said to Robert, I'm changing. This moment is changing. This moment is making me want to be a better person, to be a kinder person. And since I'm back, I've realized this kindness, I have to first and foremost make it to myself, be self-kind. And it was just so profound. I can't really explain, but it was very profound. And I was nicknamed Susie that day by one of the other inmates. Despite the inmates being with their family, their loved ones, I had run out of coins. I didn't have enough money because those vending machines were extremely expensive. And the inmate who was on the table next to us, but they were quite separate, you know, he came and he asked me what I wanted, and his mom went to buy me an ice cream. And that ice cream that we shared with Robert felt so precious. You know, it wasn't just an ice cream. It was like such a gift for someone who was already living something so precious, having a bit of time with his parents. And then completely on the other side of the room, there was another inmate that in Spanish, he was also Mexican. In Spanish, I had heard Robert at the start of the day puts extremely strong boundaries. I think he's a bit of a womanizer and all of that, but fair enough. They live in a man environment. But Robert had said to him, you don't come close to Suzanne, you leave Suzanne alone, you respect Suzanne. And this man also at the other side of the rules realized I didn't have enough money and I was hungry at one point. And he came and he gave me coins. He touched the coins. And instantly the guard was there, and that created such a situation. Suddenly the situation was there. She was like, take the coins. He's not to touch the coins. And I was so grateful for that man to have done all that because he realized I was hungry. Yeah, I'm going to go into the third day because the third day is where the most important happens. When we opened the shamanic circle on the Friday morning, I had said to Robert, we're opening it and we're going to keep it open for 3 days until we part. Meaning 3 days, 2 nights, we will have this connection, we will have this awareness. We are placed in a sacred space. We are placed in something that's holding us and that is bigger than us. And Robert had said yes. And he was very aware that he had to protect that space from the energy of death row. And the Sunday was completely different. We were with people he didn't really like, people he doesn't interact. They are in very close, intense communities. So if there are frictions or whatever, they just ignore each other or don't interact. So Robert straight away asked me not to interact with the other inmates, which was very difficult for me to be in the same room with other people, but not to interact. At one point, I did share eye contact with one of the inmates and smiled, and to his wife, but that's that. And by then, I think Robert was starting to, I could feel we were able to go deeper into our eyes, in looking into each other's eyes. We were starting to be able to be a bit more at ease with each other. Not that we were not, but because of the extreme of the situation. And Robert started telling me things about himself I didn't know about his childhood, which were very difficult for me to integrate, to accept, and to hear. So that was very difficult. Yeah, plus what was going in the room was also not, and that day I woke up and actually felt I literally don't want to go. I don't want to enter that prison anymore. It's just so difficult. It's such a difficult process. And of course, I want to be with Robert. But Robert also from time to time goes through phases of like, as if he collapses in a form of depression. And he's very like that because as he said, he doesn't quite know what to do. That's one of the drawings I did of him. He doesn't quite know what to do with his arms because he's been handcuffed so much in his life that his arms are something he's not really at ease with his arms. And actually, like when he's like that, yeah, I wrote a poem that's going to be in the second book about him being like that. Anyway, we came to the point when we were going to part fairly soon, in the next 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, and I could see Robert was starting to freak out. And the way that was being expressed is he was just talking very manically and starting to have a frantic energy. And I expect it's a bit like when, again, you're with someone who's dying and you realize now you can't afford to miss that moment. And I kind of said to Robert, "Stop it. We're very brutal with each other. Yeah, we keep it at each other. Like if we're not at our highest self, we are at it. We are just like in the book. This is how we were." So I just said, "Stop it." And I just entered his eyes. I just started looking at him very deeply in his eyes because I just knew that's the end. We have 2 hours left, and then who knows if we'll meet ever again. We went outside to the yards, and as we were going out to the yard, Robert said to me, "Let's hug," which at the time I didn't understand because I knew we were not allowed. But he grabbed me, and instantly the guard was no, so we couldn't hug. But now I know why he did it, because that last hug, you're hugging with a guard who's just there. You know you've got like 1 minute to hug. It's very mechanical and you can't feel anything. So he was trying to have a way for us to hug like two friends, but that wasn't able, we were not able. But when we came back, we had an hour and 45 minutes. And we started to sit very closely and we were holding hands. It's the first time we held hands. And I said, I kind of knew the guards would allow us. I felt those two people understood. Obviously, they're witnessing again and again that certain things that happen in this room are sacred, are unique. And we started to go into each other's eyes like very, very profoundly. And I felt Robert completely allowed me to go in, and I allowed him to go in me. But I've done that like with my husband, or I've had people in my life where I've done that, but I'm pretty sure Robert had never done that before. It was the first time in his life. And then I said to him, "We're going to close our shamanic circle." And Robert agreed to do a part. I did the closing of the shamanic circle, and at the end, Robert brought his prayer. And I was able to find a way because I wanted to bring gifts to Robert. I know the gift was us together, but normally when we see a friend or we haven't seen a friend in a long time, we share gifts, yeah, in the outside world, but I could have no gifts. So in a way, I brought gifts from Mother Earth, gifts from the sky, gifts from the East, and sacred gifts, gifts, spiritual gifts, gifts of energy, gifts of meaning. And that felt good to be able to give gifts like that to Robert. And then he did his closure and we stayed in silence. And we were very close because there was a little boy and it was very, very noisy in the room. And we parted and we looked at each other. And again, I've worked with lots of clients, but I've never experienced that. Robert was metamorphosed. He was like a different person. And he said to me, "Oh my God, you look completely different." And we were, again, I think, light or vibration, or it looked as if we were timeless, ageless, just pure, joyful spirits. And that took our breath away. And then Robert said, "Let's have one final ice cream." And I said to him, "If I eat one more ice cream, I'm going to be sick. So let's share a bar of chocolates." And we shared a bar of chocolates. And I tell you, when I came back, my husband said to me, "What was the best meal you've had when you were in the States?" And I said, "That last bar of chocolate I shared with Robert." It was, we were like two kids, at Christmas, just opening a gift. And there was such an incredible spirit joy. And I don't know, it was incredible. And then we knew we were parting. And then the moment came, that's it, we are parting. And so the guard is there and we hugged. And then in that hug, somehow Robert took my face in his hands. I didn't have glasses. And he kissed my forehead. And then he put his forehead on his foreheads. And it in linear time, it lasted a few seconds, but then I'm going to explain what happened to me. And then that's it. He's a few meters apart because that's it. He has to go back out for his security checks and all of that. And my guard is waiting to take me out. And by the way, every time Robert went to the loo, he was strip search. And he was stripped search, entering and going back out. And then Robert is a few meters away and okay, and it's a kind of like then it's a kind of blank. But it's only the next day I understood what happened at that moment when Robert kissed my foreheads and put his forehead on my foreheads. Again, like when you work with people who are dying or someone who's just died, or when you're in those moments where the veil of consciousness is very thin. I stopped being me. I wasn't me anymore. I was me, and suddenly I wasn't me. I felt sacred. I felt I became a deity. That's the only way I can put it. I suddenly felt we were just two parts of the universe touching there, but we were just the universe touching there. I felt we were Shakti and Shiva, or we were like cosmic entities, but I was not me at all. And I think since I've been back, today is the first day we met a month ago. I've been in a kind of space of grief, on almost bereavement, waves of it, because I lived that, and now this man is again out of my life. And who knows if we'll meet again. But even if we meet again, it's not going to be tomorrow. And I don't know. I'm going to close fairly soon, but I'm trying to figure out what it has done for me, that trip to go and see Robert. And I don't think I'm going to know for a while because I'm still too close to it. But I think it has made me much more self-confident, much more aware of what matters. I'm so acutely aware that I'm free, but in that freedom, there are also lots of things that are pulling for my attention from society, from the world, that disperse really the quality of who I am as a person. Ron Robert doesn't have that. The sacredness of what happened and those layers of consciousness has generated something in me that's I'm in a form of grief. That's the fact. So as time is passing and I want to be able to have questions or comments, I'm going to stop. But I'm going to ask Jason first if there is something you want to share from the first time you read those few pages of the book, or I know you've had a similar experience of not being human anymore, whilst being in a deep connection with someone. I don't know. Where is Jason?
I'm here.
Do you want to share or
Yeah,
not, as you
yeah,
want?
I can share briefly. First of all, thank you for sharing your story, and I feel very connected to all of this, of course, because I've worked with the words of Robert and Suzanne for a few years, I think it was. I don't know how long we took. So it was a deep work of going through the whole book over and over and over and over and over, and finding a way to make it flow, and to also choose what's the right content to enter into the book, because there was a lot more, and but we had to make it work so it flows for a reader and that it still has a storyline. So I think I'm very proud of what we created together, and it was difficult to be with certain sections of the book, especially the revealing of what Robert did to these three people that he killed. And yes, and it is for me also the climax of the book. And it really works well as a book, I find, because you get to know Robert as a human being. You get to know Robert through the friendship of Suzanne, and you don't know anything what he did. And this is the power of this book as well, that you befriend a human being, and then at some point in the book, you are confronted with what he did. But by this point, you already have developed yourself a friendship to this human being. And this is the beauty of this book, I find, because it challenges your own humanity and your degree of compassion and understanding. And it strikes a deep core inside of you once you reach that point in the book. And um, what I also want to share, if it's okay, I'm also a theater director, and for me, it was always obvious that this whole dialogue would work perfectly as a play as well. And I kept telling Suzanne this, that this book can also be a play, and that it would be a powerful scene between two human beings to witness on stage. So I'm looking forward to this creation one day. And I was always a big believer in this book and this story, especially because it's all based on true words, and that's quite unusual to experience this kind of friendship, that we don't even have to experience it ourselves, but we can experience it through the words of Robert and Suzanne. And I highly recommend it to everyone who hasn't read it yet. So thank you for letting me be
Mm,
part of this journey.
thank you. So, Jan, all of that is thanks to you. So I'm really warmly inviting you to come and join a few words as well, Jan, please.
Well, Suzanne, I'm going to find that very difficult because I'm still overcome by the beauty and profundity of your words. To have shared as you did, I think that was quite remarkable. Although, in terms of lifelines, not so remarkable in the sense that all along, uh, the most improbable relationships have worked. You take two people from hugely different backgrounds and cultures and often races, and people wonder at the beginning how they're going to find something to correspond about. And then you enter into the humanity of the other person. You mentioned the film 14 Days in May, and what got me started writing to prisoners, which is totally unexpected, total bombshell, was the interviews with three other prisoners in the days leading up to the execution of the young black man. And amidst all the tension and the sadness, because no one in the prison, not even the guards or the warden, wanted this young man, Edward Earl, to be executed. But in the midst of all that, the real voice of humanity came from the prisoners. And I remember one of them saying, 10 minutes before the execution, all of us are dying here tonight, a part of us. The world thinks of us as vicious and cruel, but this is worse than anything any of us could ever have done. And your extraordinary account, Suzanne, took me back to 1988 when I went out to death row for the first time in Mississippi. And I went in as a paralegal, which I wasn't, but Clive Stafford Smith, the British lawyer, sent me in to visit people who very rarely got visits. I met 9 people, had an hour each. And I remember one of them, well, as the day proceeded, it was like a series of monks coming out of their cells with that stillness, that huge depth of awareness that you have found in and with Robert. And I think he was called Willie, and he said, this place can be very still. Sometimes it can be so still that you can even hear the voices of the children who must have played in fields like this once upon a time. Well, I'd be very interested to hear what others have to say, but thank you very much.
What you've just said made me understand a bit better why do I feel different. And I think it's because the way Robert was to me, who Robert is, but how he treated me. He treated me in a way, obviously, because I've never been with someone like him, in a way that I've never been treated at a level of respect and honor. And as I said, all the way to dissolving, to just being bits of the universe with him, or being a deity, 2 deities together, because of the extreme of that environment. I'd like to suggest, if people are happy, we can carry on up till 8:45, or we'll see, but I'm going to open it now to questions or comments. So if anyone wants to say something, just unmute and share. And I'm wondering if Cynthia, are you still here, Cynthia, the shaman? I wonder if I know you also were involved with people on death row and against the death penalty. Maybe you've got something you would like to share. I would appreciate that if that speaks to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, I'm a bit at loss for words right now because I'm really feeling that immense depth of your experience and the gentleman's experience who just spoke, and also of the experience of the inmates. Something really struck with me when you said, I realized that this man is not free. And so, I was trying to imagine what it must feel like when everything is taken away, when you're stripped away of basically everything. What you have left is the essential. From what you're saying, from what you're sharing, what I'm sensing is these people, people that are in this situation, they are connected to the essential. There is a depth of presence, of being fully aware in the moment. And like you said, without distractions, without, the illusion of having infinite time and infinite possibilities. So being really in that space of being truly you and fully present in the moment. Yeah, and that's all I'm gonna share because I'm still very moved and touched by everything you've been sharing, which is extremely powerful and very courageous. So I really honor your spirit, and I honor Robert's spirit. And thank you so much for taking the journey for all of us, and for also for bringing that joyfulness that is in your spirit to such a rush and harsh environment and relationship. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
that Friday just before I feel I've given you such a little snippet on what my journey there, but on the Friday when eventually I re-entered the prison complex on death row, and again I had to wait in front of that no man's land to enter death row, I heard a sound in the sky and I lifted my head, and right above me, right above death row, I witnessed a crow playing with an eagle. And again, an eagle being like a shamanic place of focus, or an animal of focus, of internationality. It was like such an incredible moment to witness that eagle and that crow playing just above that roof. So I just want to also share when I was talking at the start of the language I was used, but there is also a language that I would like to use, is the mystery. As you said, Jan, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. Why did I watch that documentary when I was young? Why did it do what it did to me? Why now there is this succession of events that has brought me to finally meet Robert? And there was a point, I think, on the Sunday where I was saying to Robert, so who are we? And that's something we've discussed a lot throughout the years. Is we are clear, we're friends, we're co-authors, we're spiritual companions. And Robert was brilliant because, again, as you said, Cynthia, simplicity is a gift beyond belief, because indeed he's in that space of the essential. And he said to me, just us, it's just us. And that's it. We called each other just us. And it was so freeing. It was so freeing and it was so beautiful. And it's a mystery. And I feel just blessed to have that mystery in my life. And I have a vision for the future. So I'm going to say a few things. Robert is desperate for people to write to him. So anyone who wants his address, please ask me for his address. Robert really wants books. It's very complicated for him to have books. And when I ask him how did he remain sane 21 years in solitary confinement, he said, well, I read. And I realized I was in front of a man who is highly educated on an extremely wide array of knowledge. And he is limited with books now. So anyone who wants to send him books, and it's quite a complex process because it has to go via a bookshop in the States. And as Jason said, one of the projects this year is for the book to become a play. And I would love that play to enter prisons in the UK. And in the future, 1 year, 2 years, who knows, I would love to go back to see Robert, but with 1 or 2 more people with me. So we are a group. Each inmate can have maximum of 5 guests. And I'm like, that would be a first. That would have never have happened to Robert. And I'm like, that would be so incredible. Like a dinner party with friends, like we just take for granted, but that would be totally unique. Yeah. I'm going to show you, I did a drawing, a sketch of that moment when our foreheads touched. And I also realized when I was writing about it afterwards, yeah, I've got cosmic snakes of consciousness, and I realized that for Robert to dare touch my face, where he was not meant to touch my face, to put his forehead on my forehead and to kiss me there, was also the ultimate act of desperation. Desperation that's it, we were parting. And I think that was the power that made him do that. But it was in fact utter devastation. And that's, yeah, a bit like when you say goodbye to someone who dies. Yeah. So right now, although I said we're going to work on a second book and I've got more or less all of my material, the book is going to be handwritten. I want photos of handwritten text in our two handwriting. I have a friend in the States who's going to send Robert some stamps because Robert has realized nobody on death row's got stamps anymore because everything is e-letters. And then Robert's going to send me all his handwritten stuff, and then I'm going to put all that in a drawer for several months, for how long as it takes me to feel I'm healed from that visit, from everything, from that journey. And then one day I'm going to take all that out and create that second book. But right now I'm not capable. I'm absolutely not capable. I'm wondering if Glenn, you would like to share something, my husband, as you're the closest who's kind of witnessed me also through those.
Yeah, I don't know how to share actually. How do I bring myself in? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yes.
Okay, well, I can't bring my video in.
Okay, that's fine.
What more than anything else, what keeps shouting to me is you're describing a love with a capital L. Yeah, yeah. A spiritual love, and it's profound. That's what I want to say. Yeah.
So, of course, we talked about the possibility of Robert being executed. When I was there, he was very clear. He hopes he's not going to be executed. And by the way, on the Saturday, we realized we got news of how the execution had happened. And normally, execution by injection should take 10 minutes, and it took 40 minutes because they couldn't find a vein for the guy. So on the guy's arm. So again, there was a butchering, and that was just so tough to the next day to learn how the execution had been for Robert's friends. But yeah, I think also on the Sunday, what Robert kept saying to me again and again, he's in his own words, and his language is so simple but so to the point. In a way, now that's my words, but he was again and again saying to me, never allow anyone, anything, and not even yourself, to dim who you are. Never, Suzanne. And I think this is what I've taken, and this is what I'm embracing more and more. And I'm like, that's now, it's a lifelong journey, but that was really his message. Yeah.
Can I say something? I'm there's so much that I'm left speechless with, but I think the one thing I just want to say is
I can't see who's speaking. Sorry.
oh,
because
sorry, it's Laura. This is
Okay.
Laura.
Okay.
I just don't know if I've ever quite heard a story with so much deep openness and so much complete restricted closeness in the same space. It's like everything, and because of that, because of like the deep kind of the willingness to go into the deepest wound, you find the most profound connection. It's that like portal. Yeah. So I'm very, very moved. I'll have take a long time to integrate it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And that reminds me to say on the Sunday when I just thought, okay, now we just have to go because time is now, it's now or never. And I said to him, okay, stop it. And now I just went in. And after a while, Robert said to me, we were one soul. And I can't quite put words. I can't quite explain it because I have lots of people in my life I love. I've got my mom, my daughter, my husband. I'm loved. But I think it's because again of the extreme of that situation, the extreme of being with someone who hasn't been with another human being like that in more, maybe in his entire life. Yeah, it did feel we're not two separate souls. And sometimes I'm wondering, maybe in a past life we were twins, or who knows? We can try to make sense, but we can't make sense.
Mhm.
One thing I experienced also observing Robert throughout those 3 days was I've never experienced someone shapeshift like that. So we all shapeshift in the sense that we all adapt our voice, our body language to whom we are interacting and all of that, but never experienced anything. And it's only on the Sunday I understood what was going on. Because on the Friday when we went out, at one point I realized Robert was really limping. And I didn't know he limped. And I said, oh, you limp? And he said, no, no. And then the Saturday, I saw him move in different ways. And sometimes he looks extremely young, very sparkly, and then he's in that depressed state where he just goes, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And then eventually on the Sunday, I said to him, but what's that walk? Because you can walk perfectly fine. I've seen you walk perfectly fine. And then I see you walk like an old man who is limping. And he said to me, he kind of understood. And he said, yes, Suzanne, thanks. But I think when he entered death row and the extreme of being on death row, although, as he said, he had lost his freedom long before entering death row, he knew he was already not a free man because of being already in prison since he was very young, in fact. But depending on who he's with in such an extreme environment, literally his body is different, literally his age is different. Everything changes. And that was something fascinating that I've never experienced before to that extreme, to that level. And in a way, I said to him, "I'm going to stop that limping. If you can stop it, because it's not serving you. It's not serving you to go in that kind of like I don't know what old man." Because we are brutal with each other like that in our honesty. I was like, Robert, stop it. This is not serving you anymore. But anyway, it's not my place to say that. But it's up to him. But I really felt anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Suzanne, can I ask something? It's Mike.
Yes. Who is speaking again? Because I can't see.
It's Mike.
Mike, hi.
Hi. Yeah, a fascinating story. And Joe's read the book, obviously. I'm just wondering when, or if and when, you reconcile the crimes that he committed. When did you come to terms with that, if at all?
It comes and it goes. I think I can never reconcile with them. I can never it's that duality of you cannot accept, and at the same time it happened to accept Robert and to see Robert as a human. That's part of his humanity. And also that's, I think, seeing those inmates as those I don't want to glorify inmates, but I think we all have the capacity to kill. If we all have the capacity, if we had an abusive childhood, we all have, we know that's part of being a human. And I think it's a mirror for that. And as Robert said, in a way, the fact that he's on death row is maybe the only way he's still alive, because he would have died probably in his 20s, either of having been killed himself or overdose or who knows. But yeah, no, there is never really a full reconciliation. It's always something to journey with. Yeah, thanks.
Can I say something quickly?
If you can tell me who you are.
Philippa.
Philippa, yeah, hi.
I had a letter from my friend the other day.
I can't really hear you very well.
Hang on, I'll try and put the sound up. Is that better?
Let's see, yes.
I had a letter from my friend the other day, and his friend had been executed a few days before in Arizona. And he's written the most beautiful poem, and can I read you a little bit of it? It goes, when they came for him on execution day, I watched as the press formed like vultures awaiting reports to pick apart. They spoke of a monster from three decades past, the man they intended to kill. But Jeff wasn't that person anymore. I sat alone in my cell as the clock ticked towards 10 a.m., each chime gnawing at my sanity. In those final hours before his fate sealed shut behind iron bars and genuine leather straps, I could hear him whispering through the darkness, remember me not for what I did, but for who I am.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, it makes me cry because when I read it.
I haven't heard everything very clearly, but I heard that thing of to see them for a person, not for their acts. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe if we take a bit of silence, and we'll close in a minute, but let's just be in silence for a bit. Okay, thank you everybody. And I just want to say again one thing I discussed with a woman on the Sunday when I entered, who was an absolute angel to me. She brought me a coffee as we were going to enter. And that gesture of kindness and awareness, because we had discussed on the Saturday, and we discussed kindness and how kindness is a choice. And to be an angel to someone else is a choice as well. So I just want to close with that. So thank you, everybody. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Susie Q.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
to stop the recording now. How do I do that?